So, welcome to this session of unit number 5, students. In the previous session, we discussed about weapon development, the involvement of engineers in weapon development, the R&D, then what is the research going on with weapon development. Here, we are going to see about engineers as a manager. So, engineer must be a manager, must be a leader, as well as an entrepreneur. So, these are the characteristics of engineers to be a manager. So the first and prime characteristic is promoting ethical climate. So as a manager, he must maintain ethics with his or her subordinates. Then resolving conflict. So that's another important thing that engineer as a manager has to do. Then social responsibility to the stakeholders, customers, and employers. So for these three reasons, an engineer as a manager has to take care. So characteristics that defines engineer as a manager was discussed. So the main thing that we take out of this slide is conflict. So if you manage this conflict, so we can we are I mean engineers can be a good manager. So the reasons for conflicts has been listed out in this slide. So these are the following factors taken to understand what is conflict. So as an engineer, we will involve ourselves in our any of the business or any of the activity. In those activity that is related to the business creating profit, scheduling is so important. So prioritizing, so that is called scheduling. So allocation of work and arrangement of work, so that was scheduling. Then different projects of different department has to be taken. So for that we need human resources. So availability of personnel is another area where you can have conflict. Then measuring the performance of the person, so that's another thing that has to be taken for managing conflict. Then authority and responsibility. So as an engineer, you will be given a designation in an organizational hierarchy. So you have to play a role with your authority. So if you have authority, then naturally responsibility will be a parallel word. So if you claim your responsibility, then you can say that you are doing your work as a manager. So that is the area of conflict again. Then human psychology with ego. So this is related to human relation. So this has to be taken care because we as an engineer work in a group towards our common objective. So then expenditure. So measuring. So expenditure, the measurement of expenditure and the project that is being contained within the expenditure will earn profit. So that is also area where conflict arises. So these areas has to be addressed as an engineer, as a manager. So to address or to overcome this, we have 4-point strategy. So which involves people, interest, option, evaluation. So we as a human being has to be managed properly. Human relation has to be preserved. So as a people, you must involve yourself. You must be motivated continuously. So for in motivating the people, we need to create interest over the job. So interest was the thing that is used to motivate the people. So if you motivate the people, then you can avoid the conflict. So then options you must create, and as a manager, the engineer as a manager, you must create options for the people to work, and you must have proper appraisal technique that is about evaluation. So if these things are being taken care, then you can avoid conflict in the business or the activity that you are that an engineer as a manager involved. So then the other role by an engineer is consulting. So engineers can act as a consulting engineers too. So these are the three important content to take in to understand who is a consulting engineer. So a consulting engineer works in private and no salary from the employers, and he can charge fee from the sponsor. He or she can charge fees from the sponsor. So this is a role played by an engineer, and he or she has to create on his own, and he or she cannot depend on employers. So what these three things has been discussed. So consulting engineer work in private no salary from the employers, charge fees from the sponsor. Then the ethical responsibilities of a consulting engineers has to be addressed here. So these things are been listed in this slide as 4 points. The first one is advertising. So as a consulting engineer, you must advertise yourself properly. Then competitive bidding. So you must be in a competition. You must quote a lower value, or you must quote an optimal value to get out of the bidding. As you are a consulting engineer, you are involved with the competition always. Then fees. Then you must take care about the safety of the clients and the needs. So these things has to be taken as a responsibility for a consulting engineer. So if a consulting engineer has to be successful, he or she must follow this NSPE codes, that is National Society of Professional Engineer codes, which involves an advertisement made by a consultant must fall in line with these four statements. So I can see the four statements. Use of statement containing misrepresentation or omission of necessary fact. Then statement intended or likely to create unjustified expectation. Statement containing prediction of future. Statement intended or likely to create attract client by use of slogans or sensation language must be avoided. So this is about the codes developed by NSPE for a good consulting engineer. So that is for the session.